is Madeline Hildebrand, and welcome to Virtuosi Concerts' fourth pre-concert chat. Virtuosi's final in-camera session, premiering on March 31st at 7:30 p.m., features soprano Tracy Dahl and pianist Laura Loewen. And today we are joined by them, as well as a special guest, Niigaan Sinclair. Niigaan is Anishinaabe and a professor of Native Studies at the University of Manitoba. Tracy, you have crafted a meaningful and thoughtful program, one with careful and sensitive thought towards reconciliation. You've taken 6 German lieder with narratives that our Indigenous neighbors have experience with: nature speaking, treatment of women, lives taken and lost. Can you further introduce Niigaan and explain his role in this recital and program?
I'd be happy to. I know you have already introduced him as a professor, a teacher. He's a writer, a speaker. And in his function for me, we will speak of Raymond. Raymond is a connection that has brought us together because Niigaan and Raymond, my husband, taught together at Kelvin High School. And when I came to this place where I thought maybe there was something that could be found between German lieder and making a tie and learning more about the Indigenous peoples of our community, I knew I had to do that with someone. You have to walk with someone in that community. You can't do this alone. And it's best and wonderful when you can do it with someone who you have a connection with as well. And the person that came to mind was, of course, Niigaan. And as he said in our little chat beforehand, he could hardly say no because of his friendship with Raymond, which in some ways was pressure for me because I thought, I don't want to hurt this friendship. I don't want to do anything wrong. I don't want to mess this up. But
it'd probably be me that would mess it up. So,
so the when you ask someone from the Indigenous community to walk with you and help you understand, their function is as a knowledge keeper, and they're going to share their information and their culture. Or, in fact, I would say, Niigaan, that part of what we did together was that you didn't as much say, I'm going to tell you these things, but you asked me to discover them in much the same way that you talked about how nature reveals itself to us by its intrinsic nature, and that it was something that I actually had to do. There was a lot of self-work here, and Niigaan and I met about 4 times, I would say. And the first time was not about really music at all, just why was I doing it? What had brought me to this place? And I think all of us in this past year have realized in our living in our worlds of staring at a computer screen, much more isolation, much more attention to what's going on in the world because we're berated with it every time we open our computer. It just felt that I couldn't go forward with this recital without I couldn't do the same thing I've always done. And it felt like I needed to contribute back to the community by changing here. I can't do anything if I don't start here. So that's where the journey began. And with Niigaan's help, we met and we had discussions about so many things. I have this book that I kept a diary and a journal in, and journaled for myself during this time. I've looked back over it since doing the recital on Saturday, and I'm going, wow, that's where I started. That is not where I ended up. And I think that's what's been so wonderful about the journey. And Niigaan was just absolutely wonderful and so supportive throughout all of this.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Tracy. So I'd love to turn it over to Niigaan and ask you, when Tracy approached you to work on this project, besides your debt to Raymond, what were some of your first thoughts? And had you ever worked with art song in this capacity?
So yeah, I'll just say bonjour de my bagay dok ni gan we an additional cost now motion go dem when oh my yin. Kind of much give me one agujing bonjour de Shomasak Nakomasak, Niigaan and Niigaan Anishinaabe and Dao. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to share with you the language of the territory and this place in which we're in, which is Treaty 1 territory. And all of our relatives, our Anishinaabe Cree, Oji Cree relatives, our Dene relatives, our Dakota and Lakota relatives who are all part of this territory, as well as, of course, the homeland of the Métis Nation. So here we are, and we're in this space. And when I greeted you at the beginning, I said, hello, my relatives. So that's what I said. I didn't call you Nuichawagadak, right? So if I said, Bonjour Nuichawagadak, if I said, my friends, you're not my friends, you're my relatives in this territory. And so that's part of why we're treaty people. So treaty is a family making endeavor. And it's something in which we're created as interconnected beings sharing the space, not just with humans, but with non-humans. And so the water and the earth and all the four-leggeds and all of the birds and the fish that all share into this space together as an ecological network, a family of interconnected beings who depend on, rely on one another to carry responsibilities. And so that's what this is all about. And it's embedded within the very name of Winnipeg and Manitowoc, Manitoba. And so within those names of who we are, we have an interconnectedness. And I often, I play a lot with Tracy, and because, on all of Tracy's calls, Raymond would be right beside, which I always thought was kind of funny. So I'm like, I'm not working with Tracy on this. And then Raymond seemed to be like a third on there. And which just tells you also what a wonderful partnership the two of them have. And it's a real model for those of us who are, really appreciate that kind of love. But the kind of work that I did with Tracy when I was asked to do this work is much like I'm asked to do a lot in the community. I work with a number of organizations, the Royal Aviation Museum, the Forks. I'm the curator, the Indigenous curator at the Forks. I'm also a columnist with Winnipeg Free Press. So, a lot of my work is done with non-Indigenous peoples who are really they're part of two things. One is they've been mistaught, and they've been taught about, to think of Indigenous peoples in particular ways, often very negative and very one-sided in one perspective. And then the other thing is they've never been taught. So those are the two things I find most often is there's a whole heap of ignorance of people who don't understand or don't really realize their responsibilities of being a part of this territory. So when I say things, my relatives, it's really important that I explain what that means, because I think for many non-Native peoples, it's very confusing to be called as brother and sister in a place in which you've been taught to be fearful or to be mistrustful or to perhaps think of Indigenous peoples in a negative way. And so I think that's what leads to many of the misconceptions of our community when people think of the North End, for example, or they think of relationships of people who are on the streets, or people like myself, Indigenous professionals who are in the city, whose family have always been here. Like my family has never not been here. We've been here 100% for the entirety of the life in this place. We've been here since creation, and in this place, in these territories. And so we have very deep ties and relationships, and it's treaties that has built that foundational relationship, both the ways that the land and the beings within that land have created treaties with us, and that we have extended those treaties to non-Indigenous peoples into this huge network of family relations. So when Tracy comes to me, like anyone in our community, when I'm asked and invited to do that, she presented tobacco, the offering of a gift, which is the representation of time. And when you offer that gift to someone and it's accepted, because sometimes we don't have the ability, the health or the time or the energy to be able to spread ourselves. We have other obligations. So when we accept that tobacco, we choose to accept it, then we partake in a journey together. And one of the principles that we embody ourselves in is that I cannot tell you how to have relationships. It's only we can enact them together. So I can walk with you and I can show you the ways that I have relationships with the land and relationships with the air and relationships with the water, but you must pursue that yourself. I can't tell you what relationships look like because you have to experience it for yourself. Or the way that I taught Tracy is, I can teach you how to sing, but you're the one that has to do the singing. And which is, I am not the person to teach Tracy how to sing, but what I would say is that I can teach her about how I sing, but in the end, she will sing on her own, and she will build relationships on her own. And so this journey that she's partaken is something that has been a real honor for me, because it's the kind of work that I believe every Manitoban, every Winnipegger, every person of this community should partake in. It's that hard look inside of yourself to look at the things that you think about, the things you think about, the things you experience, and to take a hard look as to what is my relationships with this land? What's my relationships with the people in this territory? Those that I have been, having long relationships with, but those I've also been taught to not have relationships with. I mean, this great divide that we have in our city, often the train tracks between the north end and the south end, is a very real barrier, and it's completely arbitrary. It's completely constructed. It's something that's just made up, and it's embedded within the words of premiers of this place. It's embedded within the lives of people who live in certain areas of the city, and it's also embedded within our everyday practice. Like, many people feel very scared when they go to certain areas of the city, when frankly those are exactly the people who are going through the experiences that you too go through. They want a safe place to live, they want to love their family, and they want to experience safety. That's all anyone wants in this community, in this place. And unfortunately, Indigenous peoples have experienced the greatest amount of racism, division, and violence. And so it's an extra work for us who are in areas of privilege and power to go forth and to take those steps necessary to do the really hard work at looking at our own positions and our own relationships, and to try to break that down in some way. So what I told Tracy to do is I told her to go for walks. And I told her to experience and see the world, and see the world for what it unveils to you, both in the natural world, but also in the urban landscape. And then we would come back and we talk about it. And then we would talk about the things that she was seeing in the newspaper. And then we would talk about the things that she was witnessing in her conversations with not just Raymond, but with other people around her. And then we'd also talk about things she saw in the news and things that she was experiencing. And I'd try to explain the best I could on how why it is that things are happening the way they are, what things she could also read, and then also what are things and actions that she can do to be a contributing treaty member. Because in treaty, it's about what you offer. You cannot show up to the feast without food. People would be like, boy, you're lame. And there's nobody that knows that teaching better than Tracy, because I think I've gained 15 pounds since working with her. Oh. Because every time I've gone around her, she's like, here's some blueberry muffins. Oh, here's an entire banana bread, which I then ate, like literally I'm walking on my way home. But I'm not just talking about bringing food, I'm talking about it as a metaphor, right? What is the gift you're going to bring to this relationship? Because Indigenous peoples are certainly fulfilling their gifts to you. They are giving the gifts of you to have relationships with this territory, and the names that you carry, like those are all teachings. In the streets that make up Winnipeg, Portage Avenue, Pembina, those are all Indigenous trading routes. And the fact that all of Winnipeg has been covered by Indigenous people's teachings and knowledge, all of that is embedded within the history of this land. And then, of course, all the laws that we live under, these are Indigenous creations. Multiculturalism, democracy, healthcare, those are Indigenous creations, not non-Indigenous creations. Indigenous peoples invented those ideas. And then English and French people contributed, and we made this project called Canada. And so what I said to Tracy is, what is your gift? What's your gift? And she, it wasn't easy for her. I think she wanted me to tell her what she should do or what she should say or what she should sing. And I said, I'm not going to do that. You have to do that. And then she came back to me with these songs. And she said, these are the songs that I think most represent some of the issues that I see playing out in the community right here in Winnipeg. And I said, well, that's your task now. Your task is to then think about how you can bring those to people here in Treaty 1 territory and explain how these songs that are made from very far away also represent much of the life here. And much in the same way that when people come to the lodge and they come in, we ask people to always introduce yourself and then present your gift to the community. And you set that down on the tarp and then you unveil that gift to us, whether it be a pie or whether it be the gift of maybe, something that you've brought for the giveaway. Whatever it is that you've brought, the community will then partake in that. And that's what Tracy's going to do with this concert, is that she's going to present these gifts to the community, to everyone, and then also try to locate these in these places. And I can tell you that, having experienced it firsthand, her work, I can tell you it's pretty brave work. Something to be very proud of, Winnipeg.
That's beautiful. Well, and thank you for guiding Tracy and also us in this idea of exploring our space and our relationship with this space. That's beautiful. So my next question is for, I guess, Laura and Tracy. What does it mean to you both to make connections with this relationship that we have with Winnipeg? What's the significance of making these connections and exploring these relationships through this Western art song and through this German leader that's going to open the recital? Why don't we start with Laura, since we haven't heard from Laura?
Okay, well, it's wonderful to be here, and it was such a joyful project, and an honor to work with Tracy. And Niigaan met many times. I wasn't part of those conversations. I was lucky in summer, because I was to take a week-long course with Niigaan through the Canadian Inland University. One of the very first huge Zoom things that any of us had done. And it's wonderful to see you again here, Niigaan, and feel like my relationship with you is continuing a little bit. But you know, so much of our work as classical musicians is about learning about different cultures other than our own. You know, we you know, and they're very limited, right? Like, it's generally Western European music from the 1800s and the 1900s that I perform, but still they're completely different ways of looking at the world than what I do. And I feel like with every piece that we play, we are invited to another culture as a guest, and we understand what they found beautiful and what they valued. And ultimately we are talking about the songs are talking about the same things that we experience every day, but from a different point of view. And so I feel like when I'm performing something from the music, I become a bigger and better person, because I can understand my experience through looking at it from a different person's perspective. And often the music can give me a way of looking at my life that I didn't have before. And even more so with making music with somebody else, because we have different visions, we have different ideas, and both of our ideas make the other ones bigger and better. So I don't believe, at least for me, myself as a collaborative pianist, I would never play as well by myself than I would by being able to perform with somebody like Tracy, which is just such an honor. So that's the work that I've done for so many years. And then what Niigaan is talking to us about and challenging us and inspiring us to think about is these deep connections to where we live. And so rarely do we take that journey. It's always about somewhere else. And the perspectives and the insights that Tracy brought to me from the work that she and Niigaan did completely changed these songs for us. They're songs, most of them, that we've performed many times. And it was a revelatory experience to perform them, especially at a time like now when we haven't been able to play together, where we've been isolated in our houses, and suddenly the extraordinary gift of making music together, you know, I just felt like my heart was broken open the whole time, and I saw nothing but new things in the music. And because of that, I was able to take many different risks than before and feel completely safe and supported.
That's wonderful. Beautiful. Tracy, do you have anything to contribute?
Well, I will. I think it's important from my perspective, because that's how I've been identified. That's the music I have been singing through my career. I've been predominantly singing opera in foreign languages, singing people. It's not a person I am. I certainly am nowhere near to the personality of a Gilda or Lucia, thankfully for Raymond. But I think there's been, you know, there's a sense of theater to what I do in song. And quite often, to try to explain it to people is, if you're singing a song, you're trying to find a reason for yourself. You create a backstory, right? Well, this time, the backstory wasn't something I was pulling out of thin air. I was looking to my own community, and really, it was pretty revealing. And it was really two pieces in particular all of them are connected in some way, some of them through nature. I remember specifically, Niigaan, when we were talking about your language and talking about the difference between I pick up the rock and the rock enters my hand. Mm-hmm. That we would say, I pick up the rock, and in your language.
Yeah, so you'd say, asanik bagajanan, right? So the rock enters my hand. We don't have a way to say that we pick something up, like because the agency's in the rock, not in ourselves.
And it's just so fascinating to me. Like Laura and I spend hours trying to figure out languages that are not our own, singing in foreign languages, and going, why is it this way? Why is it conjugated this way? What are we saying? And so it took this to a completely different level. And there was another challenge that Laura, you mentioned it, and Niigaan did, is to contextualize, to try to find a way to make this, bring it home. And it wasn't hard, but we did have to do some work. And one of the songs that I had sung before, it's called Die Rose by Schubert, is a song that I can get up and sing it from this first person and talk about being this sad flower who, metaphorically gets burned by the sun. But all of a sudden, when I read this poem, there were so many things in it. It talks about, the rose gets, withers before her time in the sun. She opens up, and in the sunshine, she's burnt. And then she's very sad, and she talks about, it doesn't even matter if the nighttime is an easier time. There's no way for me to get away from this loss. And that she's going to be gnawed by the cold. And I'm going, oh my gosh, there's so much here that just feels like it's outside my door. And but I couldn't sing it the way it was written. It was written in the first person. And it's so important that when we're taking this music and looking for ways to connect it, that we don't just easily throw it into another idea and say, oh, it's going to be this. It can't just do that, because then we're appropriating. And that was a big discussion we had, and how to do that without, being respectful. And so I could have asked Laura, but I know how busy she is. I asked her friends if they could help us with changing the text. So we changed the text, and we changed it from being in the first person to being in the third person, so I could tell the story, not be the story, because it's not my story to tell. And so that took it away from being this removed piece from Germany to a piece that I could sing from here. And the space that grew, that word makes a lot of sense to me now. The space that grew around that song was entirely different than I had ever sung it before.
Wow. I don't think I realized that you did that with text. That's amazing. Yeah. That's going to be a different experience. Beautiful. We could talk for another 3 hours, but I think I would like to limit this just to one more question. We are going to be asking our subscribers and supporters and anybody watching the recital to make a donation to the North Point Douglas Women's Center. So speaking about our Winnipeg, our community, our neighbors, can you, any one of you, please tell those watching this pre-concert chat a little bit about the North Point Douglas Women's Center?
Well, I mean, I could go because I'm probably the one that's most involved, and I'm the one that said this is the organization that you should be working towards because of Tracy's content, and because she wants to deal with some issues that are of real critical importance to the life and the place in which we are in today, which is around Winnipeg and this place of Treaty 1. The most pertinent issue in our community is the violence against Indigenous women, and so I happen to volunteer with an organization that does a community walk every Sunday. We do several nights throughout the week, but I go on Sunday, and I'm one of the captains of that walk, which is the Mama Bear Clan. And so The Mama Bear Clan is an organization that certainly predates me, but it's women led. It's an organization that is run through aunties and grandmothers who run that organization, and the North Point Douglas Women's Center. And one of the initiatives that they partake in is helping families who are impacted by murder missing Indigenous women and girls, and at the same time also advocate for the support of women within the North End, because through the colonization of territories and residential schools and the Indian Act, so much violence has come into the Indigenous community, but the brunt is most felt by women, who are often the ones taking care of children. They're the ones keeping homes together. They're also the ones who are also facing the most amount of violence, not just from Indigenous peoples, but also from non-Indigenous forces, police forces, from, as we can see, the healthcare. When you go to a hospital, when you're an Indigenous person, you're often, risking your life because of the racism that's involved within the healthcare system. And we also can't forget that we are the home place in which the body of Tina Fontaine was found in this community, and the lives that young Indigenous women face. And so one of the things that became very evident to me then Tracy was working was she was thinking a lot about trying to deal with that issue in a responsible, ethical way, and then not appropriate. And I think the steps that she's taken is incredibly brave. And what I said to her during all of this is I said, there are people who are going to criticize you no matter what, but part of change is risk. And when you take a risk, when you go outside of your area in which you are trying very hard to show other people in your community, other people in your family and your children that you are willing to do the hard work necessary to try to build a healthy community, that is the most revolutionary act of all. I mean, love, especially in this time period, in this time period of a pandemic, love is the thing that produces revolutions. And this kind of love that Tracy's showing by taking a risk and trying to take an art form which she is intimately so well versed in, but then also taking the most comfortable thing that she is doing and innovating it and creating it into a home place here. And then at the same time offering her space and her power as a performer in this community to encourage others to do the same, to act differently, to think differently, and then take their vast amount of resources and offer a little bit, just like we do in the feast, offer a little bit of your gifts to those and try to build a community that love can be our foundation, not division, racism, and violence. And when you do that, you begin a revolution. And Tracy's beginning something here that I think is powerful. It's also something that that is a model to others. But most importantly, it's to be an ethical treaty member. And that's what I think is probably the most powerful thing here. And giving it to the North Point Douglas Women's Center, there's nothing better in that regard, because I guarantee to you, as I've seen it modeled, as I myself do it on Sundays, we give food to the community, we give kindness to the community. We also give people a place and a safe place to be Indigenous. And you don't find a lot of those in our community, especially in urban spaces. So we offer people a smudge if they wish. We offer people a chance to hear their stories of violence. We also we offer people a chance to be able to know that there are Indigenous peoples who are working very hard to be able to advocate for them to get resources and to get supports, and warming huts during minus 50-degree weather. So all of your donations to the North Point Douglas Women's Center will literally go to save people's lives who are living and trying very hard in the north end of Winnipeg to be able to support their families and their children in the best way possible.
Thank you. So for those watching this video, if you scroll down slightly in the description of this YouTube video, there will be a link to the North Point Douglas Women's Center where you can donate and read more about the center. Well, I think I will leave it at that. And thank you so much, Laura Loewen, Tracy Dahl, Niigaan Sinclair, for joining me tonight. And I can't wait to be part, or hardly be part, to premiere the Virtuosi concert on March 31st at 7:30 p.m. Please mark your calendars. And thank you so much, each of you, for joining me in this chat tonight.
Miigwech, thank you.